Welcome to this seminar on the 2022 presidential election in South Korea, which we call a glimpse into the future of South Korea's foreign security policies. My name is Niklas Svanström, and I'm the Director for Institute for Security and Development Policy. To do this, we have four excellent speakers. We have Dr. Sang-Yeon Ma, Professor of International Relations at the Catholic University of Korea. Formerly, he was Director General for Strategy and at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of ROK. He holds a PhD from Oxford University. But I think his most prominent title is also that he's a guest researcher at ISDP at the moment. So he's actually at the office here. Then we have Dr. Iwang Wang. Professor Wang is at the Department of International Relations at the University of Seoul. He's received his PhD from in political science from the University of Colorado. And then we have Dr. Yeon Lim, and Dr. Lim is an associate professor at the Division of International Studies at Gwangju National University. She holds a PhD from Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies, which I also have an affiliation. And then finally, we're going to have Dr. Won-Jun Kim, and he's the head of the Graduate School of Innovation, Technology Management, and professor at the School of Business and Technology Management at the Korea Advanced Institute for Science and Technology. And he holds a PhD from Seoul National University. And I think this topic that we're going to look at today is extremely important, simply because Seoul and South Korea have had a very strong focus on North Korea under President Moon. And with the new administration, it looks like at least there's going to might be a shift. If you still look at the debate, there's going to be a shift on footing and starting to lean towards more to United States again. But it's also been a very tough rhetoric against China, and also discussion about South Korea's role in the Indo-Pacific and how that extends. I actually wrote a piece for The Diplomat that came out yesterday, where I'm somewhat skeptical myself how much the new administration can manage. And I think there's a lot of limitations to any major changes. But this said, I mean, there will be some interesting changes in Seoul. And Seoul and South Korea is an important actor. And I think we often forget that Seoul is one of the major economies in the world. It's a very it's a hub of innovation. It's a very close ally to the United States. So this is an extremely important country. And I think that we don't discuss South Korea's foreign policy enough. Normally, when we discuss South Korea, we discuss it in relations to North Korea, which is extremely important. But we tend to forget South Korea as an actor. So I'm looking forward to have these four outstanding speakers present their views, and then we're going to open up for a discussion, because I think we have picked four of the best speakers from South Korea. So Professor Ma, I'm going to let you start your presentation and enlighten us.
All right, thank you very much for having me for this webinar. I'm delighted to be in the ISDP for about more than 3 weeks now, and joined this very timely video conference. It was unfortunate that I was not able to vote myself for the South Korean presidential election while staying in Stockholm. But the election race and campaign itself was very much tight and very thrilling. And we have now President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol, and he will start his tenure in 2 months' time. I don't think I can summarize his election platform in a few minutes, but I'd like to just emphasize what is the striking points that somehow contrasts his predecessor, the current President Moon Jae-in's foreign policy. As Nicholas already have mentioned, I think the new government's foreign policy will somehow aspire to be more globalist rather than somehow parochially focusing on the Korean Peninsula issue. Moon Jae-in government somehow put a very strong emphasis on North Korea issue and the Korean Peninsula issue, and international relations, foreign relations with other countries were somehow subject to that emphasis. But the new government tried to reverse that order. And first of all, it aspires to be a global pivotal state. I think that somehow reminds of the previous Lee Myung-bak government's global Korea, the catchphrase. But actually, the global Korea back in 2000 was practically means strengthening our cooperation with the United States, which is our only ally. So, well, the global pivotal state also means practically strengthening our alliance with the United States. There are several reasons, of course, to strengthen the alliance because of the somehow strengthened threat from North Korea. I think North Korea will be discussed by other participants later. But anyhow, given the leveled up threat from the North, we would have to have a more strengthened deterrence. And that deterrence, especially the extended deterrence, has to be provided by the United States, unless South Korea develops its own means to protect it. I mean, the nuclear weapons or other means of deterrence. So the alliance with the United States is more important than before, I think. So it is quite natural to strengthen our emphasis on the alliance. But at the same time, strengthening our alliance with the United States does not only focus on our strengthening deterrence against the North Korean threat. It is also relates to the United States Indo-Pacific strategy. Under the current Moon Jae-in government, South Korea has taken somewhat a balanced approach. We are cooperating, and we have been pretty actively cooperating with the United States on Indo-Pacific strategy in terms of economic arena. But when it comes to the question of security, we are quite shy. We did not actually proclaim our principles very vocally. So there have been questions arising with regard to South Korean foreign policy. For example, what if South Korea would do in case there is some unfortunate situation occurs in Taiwan Strait? What would South Korea do with the goal of international goal of protecting freedom of navigation in South China Sea? South Korea was quite silent on those international issues so far. I think a new government tries to be somewhat vocal and somewhat make it clear what South Korea stands for in terms of principle and norms in international of society. The new government somehow announced that their intention is to cooperating with the United States in those arenas and thereby upgrading South Korea's status in international society. That I think relates to its aspiration to make South Korea a global pivotal state. I think economic matters will be discussed by other participants today, but let me just briefly talk about a Quad issue. Quad is, as you know, is comprised of 4 countries: United States, Australia, Japan, and India. So, well, if South Korea joined the group, then probably the name has to be changed as well. But the new government somehow have a remote goal of joining the group, but they do not tell us that it isn't an immediate goal. Rather than trying to joining the group, the new administration would like to enhance to broaden the cooperation with the Quad countries. Quad has 3 working level groups on vaccine and climate change and emerging technologies. So South Korea actually has its own immediate interest to cooperate with those in those arenas. So the new government is trying to start cooperation in those specific working level issues, and then if the time is right and conditions are ripe, then we may try joining the group itself. But as I just mentioned, the joining the group isn't an immediate concern or goal at all. Thirdly, I'd like to say something about Japan. Korea-Japan relationship has been worsening for, I think, for the past decade. It just has been worsening because of the many issues related to our past and history, especially during the Japanese colonial period in Korea. But United States has been somehow encouraging its 2 ally partners to make their ties somewhat closer. Those urge and encouragement has been somehow futile so far. I think new government, however, try another trial to mend the ties with Japan. There, I think, will be a Quad summit occurring in May in Tokyo, Japan. That means President Biden himself will visit the region, and that's going to be a prime opportunity for Korea to meet with the American president, probably in a new presidential house in Korea. I think the issue of Korea-Japan relations, how to somehow improve the relationship, will be the #1 topic that will be discussed with the new Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol and U.S. President Mr. Biden. So I think those 3 will somehow covers the broad picture of a new administration. I'll stop here, and if some other questions are raised, then I'll discuss a little more later. Thank you.
So thank you very, very much. I think that was an extremely good introduction. I will hand over to Professor Wang and let him make his presentation, and then I'll try to open up for questions afterwards. And for the audience, I would just encourage you, if you have questions, write them up in the Q&A function, so you can, and I will read them out for you. You cannot ask the questions directly, but I'll do my best in reading your questions the best possible way. So, Professor Wang.
Okay, thanks, Nicholas, and also the ISDP for inviting me this timely and wonderful seminar on Korea and the South Korean presidential election. As the Professor Ma Sang-yoon talks about the President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol's the foreign policy, I'm gonna talk more about focusing on the inter-Korean relations and North Korea policy. As Professor Ma said, that the President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol will emphasize more the international part, the global part of the Korean foreign policy. And like that, I also think that the President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol will focus more on the international cooperation also in dealing with North Korea rather than the inter-Korean relations. So President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol actually during his campaign strongly supported the sanction regimes, international sanction regime of North Korea. And I think we may describe his policy as one of the maybe the hardline policies towards North Korea, compared to the current president Moon Jae-in, and that focuses on the putting on pressure to enforce Pyongyang to give up its nuclear weapons program before anything else. So his policy may also be regarded as a denuclearization first policy, which argues that the North Korean denuclearization should go first before anything else, just as two previous, conservative president, Lee Myung-bak and Park Geun-hye, pursued. Conversely, as you understand, the current president, Moon Jae-in, focused on the peace first policy, the emphasizing the importance of bringing the peace back on the Korean Peninsula. Excuse me. So the President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol believes that the United States and South Korea should cooperate, very strongly to keep sanctions and pressure, keep working to enforce Pyongyang to back down, even if the hardline policy may destabilize the North Korean domestic the politics. So I think many people in his conservative group believe that the strong pressure and sanctions on North Korea will not spell disaster, but rather resolve many immediate, problems, North Korean problems, such as nuclear issue, internal chaos, and humanitarian crisis, etc. So, and the producing massive economic and social benefit for the Korean Peninsula and East Asia, and also the world. So, but the thing is that the problem is that whatever policy the President-elect Yoon, will put in place, the Kim Jong-un, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, seems to have his own timetable actually. So North Korea is not likely to respond to South Korea's new government's policy toward Pyongyang, and North Korea has, already declared the Hajeon breakthrough strategy, the 정면 돌파전 in Korean, at the 7th Central Committee of the Workers' Party in late December 2019, and also the 8th the Party Congress the last year 2021, the 8th Party Congress, the North Korean Workers' Party Congress. So North Korea actually decided to seek for a long-term survival strategy against the United States and South Korea, rather than coming back to the negotiation table. And moreover, the North Korea is now concentrating on dealing with the coronavirus. Believe it or not, there is no confirmed cases in North Korea, believe it or not. But anyway, North Korea cannot just move on in that situation. So this may be the main reason for its relative quietness, despite its recent the long range rocket launches, maybe the ICBM class. So the coronavirus is important still in North Korea, although there is no, they argue that there is no confirmed cases inside North Korea. So if the coronavirus situation gets better, the North Korea may, move forward according to its own timetable, not the U.S. timetable or the South Korean timetable. So however, the policy environment that the President-elect Yoon will face in dealing with North Korea and North Korean nuclear issues will not be much favorable, I think. Both the United States and North Korea are not eager to get back to the negotiation table, and North Korea is not likely to initiate the denuclearization, and North Korea is not likely to be coming back to the negotiation table anytime soon. So there's many difficulties internally and externally. So, and also the Biden is not really eager to the North Korea policy. Although the Biden moved very quickly for his domestic agenda. He is relatively very slow in the foreign policy the agenda, especially the North Korea issue, even after the North Korean policy review. So in this situation, there is not much room for the North Korean policy and North Korean issue and the North Korean negotiation, even the denuclearization negotiation. And furthermore, the Ukrainian situation will make it much more difficult, for the Biden administration to focus on the North Korean issue. So even after the Biden administration, finished the North Korean policy review a long time ago, and the Biden announced that his policy characterizes his policy as the calibrated and practical approach, but it is still not clear, how different Biden's North Korea policy is from those by the President Obama and even the President Trump. So this is the reason for many people saying that the Biden foreign policy is adopting the strategic patience again, the strategic patience, version 2.0. So if the Biden keeps the strategic patience, it will be more difficult to persuade North Korea to come back to the negotiating table. In that case, the incoming South Korean government will have much difficulty in dealing with North Korea too. So in this case, there is a high possibility, I think, that the tensions between North Korea and the United States and North Korea and South Korea will rise again, maybe possibly after the president, the elect Yoon took office in May. And as you have seen, the recent rocket launches by North, presumably the ICBM class, the reflects, I think, this situation. Furthermore, it appears to me that the South Korean people are not really interested in dealing with North Korean issues. Mostly the younger generation in South Korean people are not really interested in the unification issues. And the younger generation, most of the South Korean people are embarrassed at the North Korea's military provocations and the nuclear test and the missile launch. So most of the Korean people support, of course, the most Korean people support the peaceful resolution of the North Korean issue, but the coronavirus and the economic depression in Korea, inside South Korea, and they occupied their thought more. So it's very difficult, the environment, unfavorable to the President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol in dealing with North Korea. But of course, the U.S. ROK alliance will play a critical role in the North Korea policy. President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol, stressed that more the importance of the strengthening the U.S.-Korea alliance, or rather than the inter-Korean relations, because he focused more on the America's role and the international cooperation and also the alliance coordinated approach in dealing with the North Korean issues. I'm very sorry about this, the somewhat pessimistic, the prediction, but I think that this is just as it is with regard to the North Korean issues. Let me stop here.
Thank you very much. I wish I could be more optimistic, but this is, I think, exactly what the North Koreans have been very consistent with. And I think the international community often exaggerates its own role in North Korea. And so now with the weapons test, they always said, what triggered them? And it's like, exactly as you say, well, it's a long-term plan. They don't really, they have their own agenda.
Yeah.
But thank you very much. And Professor Lim, I would be delighted to hear your presentation.
Yes, good, thank you. Again, thank you for inviting me to this very timely seminar. I'm very honored to have this chance to share my view and exchange our thoughts with a great scholar here. Well, the Professor Ma already shared his own observation analysis about the broader picture of the President-elect Yoon, and Professor Wang more focused on the North Korea related issues. And in my own presentation, I'd like to actually focus or illuminate domestic political environment that created this result and will be influential to the new president. Again, first, it's not even, I think, necessary to re-emphasize how fierce this specific election was. As we all know, the margin was the closest ever. And it is, but still it is probably, I think, worth emphasizing that the identity politics played a very important role in this specific election to a large extent. This time, the tendency of identity politics was clearly seen between generations and between regions, and of course between classes and between the genders too. So what was most interesting to me about this election was that these various elements of identity politics were intertwined. And today, of course, but today's our topic is foreign and the security policy. So let me just talk about the identity politics related to these two things, again, the foreign and security policy. So in the past, the North Korean issues, of course, were one of the most important criteria for Koreans when they decide their preferred political party. I have continuously actually highlighted that how to see North Korea and how to see Japan. These two are the two basically were the two axes that determine the South Korean national identity. You know, how to see Japan, of course, it's related to how to see our pre-modern and modern history, including the fall of, Korean Empire or forceful colonialization by Imperial Japan, and how to see North is related to how to see the Korean War and who is more responsible, who should be blamed more for today's situation, right? And but the thing is, how to see the United States or how to see the China or Russia, those are, I think, is more like a kind of it comes next to the how to see the North and the Japan. So that has been my kind of, argument, but this is changing. That's what I'm trying to highlight through my presentation. Again, this tendency, of course, was observed, especially among the senior citizens, senior voters who are, in their 60s or even older. they supported the Conservative Party's candidate Yoon, and of course that's not the only reason, but North Korea related issues, Moon Jae-in government's policy approach toward North, I think that was one big thing too. They do care about the security concerns. Meanwhile, the anti-Chinese sentiment was more intensified actually during the Beijing Winter Olympic. I'm also curious how Europeans actually responded to the Beijing Olympics, but here in Korea, obviously it was a big thing, and even in Japan too. So especially again, the young people, this also had a kind of negative effect in conjunction with the evaluation of the Moon Jae-in government's its strategic ambiguity or more pro-China tendency. And Ukraine too. I already saw a question raised by one from the audience, and Ukraine factor as well. Many South Koreans, I think, feel very sad, of course, and sympathetic to what was done to Ukraine by Russia, who doesn't seem to respect the international law and who doesn't seem to care about international reputation. It is reminiscent. It is reminiscent of the tragedy we experienced many decades ago. So in that sense, I do think the war in Ukraine was another a kind of factor. Having said that, now let me briefly talk about this so-called changing trends in Koreans' identity. Professor Hwang already mentioned that the younger generation, young people, they are not that interested in North Korea-related issue. Yeah, that's true. Many statistics, many survey data prove that. For example, like 2021 Unification Perception Survey conducted by KINU, for example, 74% of the so-called Millennium MG generation, they responded that they don't have any interest in the North Korea. On the other hand, at the same time, an overwhelming majority of all generation expressed strong support for the ROK-U.S. alliance and the presence of the U.S. forces in Korea. Interestingly, likability, so-called likability or like a favorability to all the other four major powers, again, China, Russia, Japan, U.S., actually went down. Well, it might need more like a careful analysis to understand what all these figures mean. But anyhow, to me, it seems like, now Korean society is looking for another, as it wants to beyond, it wants to be beyond North Korea, it wants to be beyond just Japan, victim complex, or like it wants to be beyond, again, the China, of course, the trade partner, the largest trade partner, but sometimes it's pretty threatening and so on. So it looks like, again, the Korean society is now looking for something else. So in that sense, I think Yoon, the Professor Ma already introduced the concept, the global pivotal state suggested by Yoon himself. I think Yoon echoed this kind of new changing trend by presenting that idea in the article titled, again, "The South Korea Needs to Step Up," published by Foreign Affairs 1 month ago from the election. So in this article, he and of course he might not be the only one who synthesized all these thoughts. Of course, his advisors, I think, helped to complete all this idea. But according to the article, again, he suggested that, again, the South Korea can and should play a more proactive role in international affairs. And Yoon argued that South Korea should consider, but beyond all these things, should consider the alliance with the United States as a comprehensive strategic alliance in leaping forward as a global pivotal state, and pledge to strengthen the cooperation with the United States in various fields, not only just, again, military. In addition, Professor Ma already mentioned this too, but Yoon wrote that Seoul should recognize the strategic importance of Tokyo more. And in the TV debate too, when he was asked, which of the leaders of the US, Japan, China, North Korea, which one you're going to meet first, and he answered that, the United States absolutely, then Japan, China, then North Korea was the last one. Again, well, there are many different thoughts. Of course, it was a pretty controversial remark, but still, I think it indicates many things. Just for your information, then the ruling party's candidate, Lee Jae-myung, he refused to answer to this question. So now, let me share briefly my prospect of the Yoon administration. The thing is, again, domestically, he already faces so many challenges, very difficult challenges. Again, the society is divided, polarized, and the National Assembly, the ruling party, the People's Power Party, going to be the ruling party, but they are the minority in the National Assembly. So the current incumbent ruling party going to keep their majority until the next general election, which is April 10 in 2024. So politically, it's going to be very difficult to go through anything. And economically too, South Korea goes through now is suffering from the stagflation-like situation. Again, the prices go up, but economy is very much stagnated. Having had these situations, again, absolutely all these economic issues should be the number one priority for the upcoming government. So having had all this kind of difficulty, the Yoon administration faces, of course, many other issues in international affairs. Again, the Professor Hwang already explained about the challenges from North, but the volatile situation in Europe is not unrelated with us. And, with all this kind of uncertainty, fluidity, many, I think, Koreans are concerned about the possibility of arms race in this region as well. For example, former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo, he already mentioned the sharing nuke. Of course, it's, it might not be that plausible, but still he mentioned the possibility already. And the fourth industrial revolution or global value chain restructuring, climate crisis, and so on, all this global challenges are there too. So my point is South Korea, of course, needs to, I think, deal with all this difficulty with agility. Well, the Moon Jae-in government was trying to perform the so-called strategic flexibility, but the upcoming government, they also needs to move or behave with agility, I would say. So let me wrap up my talk. And I think for the new government, it will be extremely difficult to make a good balance between a competing or even conflicting interests, even among the domestic players or among the major those powers. At the same time, again, the Yoon or his supporter, they want to pursue another way, again, the global pivotal state. Still, the concept itself sounds a little vague as of now, but what he or his supporters were trying to do is, again, the South Korea wants to be more proactive, again, overcoming the former position as a just reactive state. So let me stop here, and I'm actually looking forward to the further discussion with all of you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, again, these are absolutely crucial issues that comes up, and it's sort of paints a very complicated picture, as I think you all have added to. And I don't expect it to be easier now when Professor Kim takes over and gives his presentation. Professor Kim, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks so much. Maybe let me share my slide, a very few slides. I'll talk over the slide. Can you see? Great. Great. So for my part, I will kind of share the views, especially regarding these security issues, especially related with science and technology factors. I think the new dimensions that we are kind of facing in this new government and currently other countries as well is the science and technology security, and it became more national security as well. And I believe everybody knows that for the past few decades, I think the globalization was one of the key driving factors of economic growth, and China as a main factory of the global industries. But now the margins from this low income labor from this Asian and Chinese area became kind of exhausted, and now the global competitions of industry and country became more became bare competitions, and the core competitiveness of the competition became the technology issues. So these key technology issues became, I think it's getting more important in coming decades, unless we find other marginal factors that affect economic growth in coming decades. So I call it as a globalization 2.0 or decoupling paradigms in coming decades. And as this new paradigm getting in, I think this competition against centering on the science and technology issues is getting into the decision factors of national security and diplomacy in the current paradigms. This fact is also very vivid in the Korean national diplomacy and also the security perspective. And let me first share some of the kind of broad directions that Korea now facing in these new paradigms. So I had my institute called the KAIST Institute, KAIST Innovation and Innovation Policy and Strategy Institute actually hosted a forum, national forum, regarding these issues about 2 months ago, and we invited the directors of the Ministry of Trade and also the Ministry of Science and Technologies. And also, I'm also the members of the advisor for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And all they are talking about, some of the key directions are kind of summarized as follows. So first, here, as you can see, now the private companies become more national security assets. So in these new paradigms, the private and corporations getting more important assets for the economic growth and also the national security and foreign affairs in all dimensions. So firms become national and global strategic assets. And now I think a new government also will gonna change some of the directions in dealing with these private companies and corporations. So yesterday, the president, the new kind of elected, the future president, Yoon, kind of had a meeting with the corporate people. And he announced very interesting different types of policy and strategies for the private sectors. And I think he will very, very much cherish the private sectors as one of the key factors of the economic growth and the policy for the government. And the second part is that this science and technology innovations, as it becomes more security assets, this R&D is now getting more important as an R&D, as an R&D-P, added the P as a protections. So before, R&D was more globalized activities for the government and then also the company-wise. But I think the protection issues will be one of the very important issues in setting up this policy, especially for science and technologies, even for the very basic science areas. So this new government, I think this protection perspective will bring many different bags of policy for the protections in many dimensions of science and technology areas. And the third one is the government policy and corporate strategies is getting more integrated. As I said, it's become a security asset for the nations, and the government will get more involved in dealing with these corporate innovation issues, like semiconductors and the batteries and AIs. These kind of critical and emerging technologies, as every other nations are kind of in the same line, but the Korean government also try to following up and support these corporate strategies in the perspective of securing national security as well. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs also strengthening the division of these science and technology security sectors, and kind of like the one of the kind of the how to say the agenda that is being listed is how to collaborate between Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Trade and Ministry of Science and Technology, centering on this science and technology key security assets. It'll become one of the important policy agenda, I think, in the new government. The fourth one is about restructuring and transformation of global value chain and centering on science and technology. And I call it as a global science chain. So in the globalization period, global value chain was one of the key factors of economic growth, international affairs, and international collaborations. But as this science and technology becomes more security assets, this fundamental basic science and the core innovation sources is getting more important to protect and to get more competitiveness against other collaborators. So this global science chains, how you collaborate in the science perspective, will getting more important in securing the key fundamental resources and assets for the technology and industry part. So this global science chain will become more important, and the Korea, especially for regarding a science, technology, human resource perspective, I think the Korean government is trying to integrate two ministries, Ministry of Science and Technology and Ministry of Human Resource, Education. I think it's also linked with these issues of how we can strengthen this science chain from the perspective of a human resource perspective and education perspective. And the fifth one is about independent innovation ecosystem. It's getting more important under these security paradigms because I think you know that as it becomes security asset, the science and technologies, nations are getting more like along with these dimensions of R&D. So the nation should be more independent in these ecosystems of innovation. So how you can kind of foster and strengthen this innovation ecosystem of linking between science and industry, and also make it connected with other key partners and players in the science perspective will be much more important in next paradigms. And I think the new government is also along the same line in our discussions. So if I share some of the new directions of this new government, the first one is pro-private sector policy. I think, as I just mentioned, the President Yoon is very keen on working with and also fostering the private sectors, a little bit of, how to say, different dimensions of this current government. So it'll strengthen the collaboration between the Korean government and private sectors, especially in global value chain and science chains. And as I said, Ministry of Foreign Affairs are currently strengthening the science and technology diplomacy and security sectors. And the Korean government will be also a very important partner for the private sectors in many dimensions beyond these foreign affairs issues. This is one dimension. And the second part is that closer collaboration with the US and Europe, especially as a strategic alliance in science and technology, will be much more important in this new government. And and actually, this is kind of a new dimension for the foreign affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the foreign affairs related issues. I think, but this will be strengthened in many dimensions. And the third one, the deeper collaborations in critical and emerging technologies. I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, the U.S. government, I think, passed legislations about science, technology, human resource to strengthen the adopting the science and technology human resource from countries, especially like Korea. So giving much easier the H-1 visa and also the accommodation of them and the government supporting their relocations to the US. This will also affect in many dimensions of Korean industry and Korean human resource in science and technologies. So on the one hand, it will also strengthen the collaborations in science and technology between the Korea and the US. And also it will bring higher mobility of human resource in science and technology between these two countries. And this will actually make it deeper, the collaborations between these two nations in that way. But on the other hand, there's also some concern that the Korea kind of may lose some of the competitiveness in some specific industry and sectors. That's will be really an important kind of challenging issues for the Korean government, with this deeper collaboration with the US, kind of flowing many human resource to the US part. So yeah, we are discussing of how we can protect and kind of strengthen the human resource part in these critical technology areas in this new government, and that will be also important issues. But on the other hand, in the US perspective, the whole created by the kind of the Chinese, how they say, exemption, or the US now actually the kind of protected the value chains and science chain within the US against this China, and that created a big space for the other nations like Korea to get involved in the science and value chain and innovation area. So there will be, on the one hand, opportunities for the Korean government and Korean nations to get closer and to create a deeper collaboration with the US. On the other hand, this will challenge Korean industry and the science technology industry somewhat in the long term, lose some of the key forces and competitiveness. So this will discuss further in the new government. And the last one is about tighter collaborations with the selected country against climate change and pandemic. Is another important dimensions of the security and foreign affairs. And especially these global collaborations will become much more important in diplomatic issues. I think currently the foreign affairs, the teams, I mean, for example, like one of our professors at KAIST now joining this, the teams of the transfer teams of the government. He is the expert in the nuclear engineering, and deputy director also very pro to this nuclear power plant and climate change issues. So I think this the climate change and pandemic issues will be another important dimension that the new government place important weight on this side. So let me finish my sharing, and then we can, hopefully we can discuss further about the other issues. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I thought it was very interesting, and actually it's the last presentation by Kim is also very close to the research I'm doing on supply chain security, but mainly on a transatlantic connection there. But the thing is, I mean, can we afford not to? I mean, you mentioned that collaboration with the United States might decrease some leverage for South Korea, but the question is relying on China not even more damaging in the long run? And I mean, that would be my argument for Europe and United States that we can't really afford not to engage. It will be extremely costly, without doubt, but sometimes it's better to take the cost now before the interest rate kicks in and it becomes even more expensive. But I would like to open up for a discussion. If any one of the panelists have any comments on each other's presentation or something they would react to, so I will give that the floor to the panelists. Is there anything that your colleague said that you would like to reinforce or dispute? Or you're all in agreement?
Nicholas, there was a
Yes.
question raised in a Q&A.
Yeah, by Börje Ljunggren, how does the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the evolving security situation affect ROK? And I mean, of course, this is only on all European minds, and I think we can reinforce that, because if China now suddenly supports Russia diplomatically, financially, and even militarily, how would that play in? Would that change the ROK debate? So, Professor Mahd, you would like to start?
Right. Well, with regard to the question about the impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine on South Korea's foreign policy, I think we can think about 4 possible ways that relates to the Korean foreign policy. Firstly, as Professor Hwang already mentioned, the Ukraine crisis will lessen the American, attention to the North Korean problem, North Korean question. So somehow, of course, the Biden administration would like to say so, but their attention is already very much focused on the situation in Ukraine. So there's very little energy left to pay attention to the Korean Peninsula issue. And that's, of course, working level officials continue to keep their watching on the Korean Peninsula issue, but at the very high policy making level, I think it is somewhat difficult to raise the awareness of the seriousness that the North Korean issue actually posed for. Second effect, I think, is the South Korean foreign policy, which is called a new Northern policy under the Moon Jae-in government, is somehow being death sentenced. The South Korean public opinion about Russia is very bad now. And well, even during the Moon Jae-in administration, our relationship with Russia was not that good. It was maintained status quo, but we haven't advanced any big we didn't have achieved a big progress in improving the relationship. There were several economic projects, but that didn't also bring much achievement. And now, even under the current situation, those projects, I think, is very difficult to pursue. So that means death of the new Northern policy. Thirdly, I think, as Nicholas had just mentioned, that the U.S.-China relationship will fundamentally shape South Korea's foreign policy. That's quite inevitable. Of course, the key question is, what is the real situation of U.S.-China relationship in the new environment of Russian invasion of Ukraine? I think the overall trend for the longer term, I think, is Korea will be somewhat closer will try to, attune to the Western policy more and more. But question is the speed and how fast it is going to do so. If the China will maintain the current, position, which somehow unclear in its support for Russia, and then I think the Korea will continue to try the more practical cooperation with China, because there's many necessity to do so. But if China very clearly goes against the West by supporting Russia clearly, then there's no room for Korea to side with China any longer. So that is, I think, a key question. Fourthly, I think our economic policy and foreign economic policy as well will be very much affected by the Ukraine crisis. Energy prices are rising rapidly worldwide, and in Korea as well. And the question of inflation, and I think also affects our international foreign economic policy, I'm sorry. And already economic affairs is featured as a security issue in Korean government. And that trends will be intensified under the new situation. That's my take regarding how the Ukraine crisis will affect South Korea's foreign policy. Thank you.
Nicholas,
Press one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me jump in, and then I'm gonna answer the question about the China factor and also the Ukrainian issue. First of all, China is a very influential, very important country in the world, globally. But its influence will be much stronger in Asia, and especially in Northeast Asia. But that its Chinese influence, the Chinese impact will be much more influential on the Korean Peninsula. So China not only has the leverage on North Korea, but also has the whole Korean Peninsula, including South Korea. So so this is a very important, critical issue for the future of the Korean Peninsula, including the North Korean nuclear issue and also the Korean the reunification issues. There is some saying in Korea that the security with the United States and economy with China, but I think that's the incorrect, because both U.S. and China are important in both areas, in security affairs and the economic affairs. During the Cold War, there was some kind of a balance of power on the Korean Peninsula between, the influence by the Soviet Union and the United States. But after the end of the Cold War, the South Korea enjoyed a relatively, favorable environment, the situation, with the U.S.-Korea alliance, and this North Korea was the isolated, nation, after the losing its, Cold War great power patron. But as the China, the rising very fast, and then there is the incoming the balance power on the Korean Peninsula, influenced by the rise of China and also the U.S. and the U.S. strong involvement in this area, especially including the Indo-Pacific strategy. So Korean Peninsula, especially South Korea, is now facing with a very difficult situation, difficult environment, and then so that's why the next president, the president-elect, the Yoon Suk-yeol's government is really important in dealing with these issues. Secondly, the Ukrainian issues, that in the global impact is the same, just as the Swedish people experienced, that the South Korean people also experienced the difficulty, as the Russia invades Ukraine. But with regard to its impact on the North Korean issues, I say maybe because North Korea explicitly support Russia, they don't say much about the implication of that Russian invasion. But the thing is that first of all, the Russia has a veto power in the UN, so it's really difficult for the South Korean government and the US government to initiate another additional sanctions in the UN Security Council. Russia doesn't have the power and capacity to enable the North Korean denuclearization, but the North Korea has, Russia has the power and the capacity to enable, the North Korean nuclear dialogue. So maybe the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the emerging the worsening relations between the US and Russia will give definitely the negative impact on the Korean Peninsula too. And also North Korea didn't say explicitly about the Ukrainian the nuclear issue, but as you know that the Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons as according to the memorandum in 1994, and the North Korea will unlike the Russian expectation, the North Korea will think that their decision was right if they give up the nuclear weapons, they cannot guarantee their own security and state security and the regime security, something like that. I think that is the main the lesson from the Russian invasion on Ukraine with regard to the North Korean issue. Let me stop here.
Thank you. Professor Lim or Professor Kim, anybody would like to add to that? Or else I can move on also to the second question there from General Mats Engman, who's to Professor Kim. Your argument on S&T becoming more as a national security concern. Will this drive ROK closer to Japan, as China might not be a preferred partner anymore? And I think we can also, that's I think an extremely important question, but also maybe I think what said before. I mean, how will this affect the public opinion in South Korea? Because we have the historical issues that is still very vivid, and will this be perceived in a positive light, or will it be perceived more negatively? So I will open up for that. Professor Kim, do you want to start?
Yes, so I think very important questions. And for the one hand, let's just forget the foreign affairs issues in this kind of agenda. Then you can find that industry portfolios of Japan and China is fairly different with Korea, and also the level of technology between Korea and China is also different. So on the one hand, from the Japan perspective, we have quite conflicting and overlapping industry profiles in some aspect, like batteries and semiconductors. Now, Japan is trying to foster the strategic industry. So I'm not sure about our closer collaborations in this perspective with Japan. Just forget the foreign affairs issues or the other issues, but in just purely the economics and industry perspective, I think the closer collaboration with Japan is, I'm not sure about how beneficial to the Korean industry in some sense. So in that perspective, I think the collaboration with Japan is more of a competitive position with Japan in the industry perspective. So that is the one answer. But foreign affairs perspective and kind of other perspective, maybe we have different views. In the China, China is also very emerging in many dimensions, but our center also kind of analyzed this technology level of all these key technologies like batteries and AIs and AI semiconductors. and now some other aspects. And the positioning of the technology level of the China compared to Korea is somewhat different in some sense. So the collaboration with the China in the perspective of science and technology, I think there's not much benefit for Korean industries and Korean and kind of science and technology dimension perspective. So even without this other perspective of the political perspective, I think the China is not really the attractive partners in science and technology perspective. So rather the market perspective is very, very attractive, but now I think it's became too much uncertain. So the attractiveness has been dropped very much for the past few years. So in that perspective, China is, I think, as the main factors of the collaboration will be as a political partners, not rather than the science and technology partners in coming decades. Rather, the US will be much more attractive partners for as science and technology perspective and industry perspective, because on the one hand, for the industry profile perspective, there's much to kind of collaborate, and also while the competitions, but there's kind of the pro and con dimensions and attractive point. So I think that may be my answer, that while the more politically and diplomatic perspective, the Japan and China maybe will have try to get quite good relationship. But the industry and economic perspective, I think the benefit is not much there in these two partnership, I think. Yeah, that's my short answer, but yeah, this limited answer for my, yeah.
Professor Lim, do you want to add to that?
Well, thank you. You know, Korea-Japan relations, actually, I share some observation with the Professor Kim, because many of us just focus on the historical issues, but more fundamentally, I think, you know, there are more and more divergence between the two countries in terms of grand strategy or technology, distribution, labor, division of labors, and so on. What I'm trying to say is, in the era of Cold War, you know, the United States was the largest market for both Japan and Korea, and Japan did have more like a fundamental technologies, whereas South Korea was a more like a kind of manufacturer. We assemble parts and then manufacture it and sell it. So there were kind of, you know, division of labor among at least the three. But ever since, you know, China rose that much, or China became the largest market, and in the dimension of technology, science and technology, China is challenging to almost everyone. So China is really now a game changer, and Korea also has strengthened its own science and technology. Means now, as Professor Kim briefly mentioned, Korea-Japan relations are now much more competitive. It's not that complementary any longer. So that's one big, actually fundamental problem. That is why our grand strategies are now more divergent, or sometimes conflicting, competing. That is one big reason, I think, one big reason that, how would you say, makes those resolution of historical issues more difficult. So having said that, now, you know, Yoon Suk-yeol also emphasized the economic security. It sounds like, for example, former Prime Minister Abe, or even the current Kishida, he also highlights economic security. So I'm also very much curious how the new government can synthesize all this, you know, together. So, well, this is not even kind of answer to the question, but I think this time is very, it makes another kind of room for Korea-Japan relations as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just
Professor
add,
Wang?
let me
Yeah.
just quickly talk about the Korea-Japan relations. Definitely, the President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol will, pursue the strengthening the relations among the U.S., Korea, Japan, trilateral relations, and definitely that is the policy for the new incoming Korean government. But the thing is that the problem is that how the Korean people respond to that, the trilateral, the relation. Trilateral relation maybe all right, but the bilateral relations in the Japan and South Korea, we have lots of issues. So, we have many former experiences, former cases of the difficulty, such as the sex slave, agreement, the comfort women agreement in 2015, and also the trisomy issue, the intelligence information, agreement between Korea and Japan. So, in every case, is the South Korean people responded very negatively, and then which made it very difficult for the Korean, South Korea, and the Japanese government to lead to the agreement and move forward. So that is the South Korean public opinion, and how the domestic politics will be a critical the factor in the determining the future of the Korea-Japan relations in the future, I think.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We also have, I'm gonna take them, we only got, we have one question from Dr. Jagannath Panda, who is the head of our Indo-Pacific Center. And will South Korea be part of the new Indo-Pacific supply chain initiative by Australia, India, and Japan? Of course, we have discussed that a bit, but I think it still is an interesting question. And I think that question also goes to other than Professor Kim, because it's not only about pure economy, it's a lot about politics and everything. And also how far South Korea's relation with China will be affected with Beijing supporting Russian invasion. I mean, if there's anything more you would like to add to that, please feel free. Kim, do you want to take the first stab? Okay,
thank you. It's very interesting and good, important questions. So in the Pacific supply chain, actually, I'm quite not know well deeper about this new initiative, and I actually read through those new initiative between these three countries about joint project collaboration in the automotive, electronic device, and healthcare sectors, and also the kind of the carbon emission related collaborations. On the first hand, the automotive, electronic device, and healthcare sectors are quite, the Korea industry is quite competitive in global market. And the supply chain perspective, just my understanding whether how much the Korean can get the kind of the benefit out of this entering into this chain seems not clear for me in some sense. And also when these three countries already started, I'm not sure what's the background of this new initiative, whether it's related with the key resources and raw materials from especially Australia and some of the Indias. Maybe then may also the driving motivations of this new initiative. But I think Korean perspective, just at a glance, is not quite clear of the attractive point of getting into this new initiative in the global value chain perspective. So, but I don't quite know deeper about this initiative, so my answer will be very limited. Please understand in some sense. But I know that the Ministry of Trade actually has been trying to form these supply chain groups worldwide with the Chile for some key resources and some other like Australia as well. I think Korea has been independently tried to form this supply chain collaboration with many countries for the already like it's been more than 1 year. We have to think about that. So our own established collaborations and initiative and how getting into this new chain is beneficial. And for me, just it's not clear in some sense.
Anyone else who would like to add to Professor Panda's or Dr. Panda's questions?
Well, let me say
Professor
something
Ma?
about the question. I think I agree. I pretty agree with Professor Kim's answer. Well, Korea is very much keen on diversifying its global supply chain. In that regard, I think if our cooperation with Australia, Japan, India does not irritate China too much, then we will try. I think. Well, that's I think a the general direction that Korean government is pursuing so far, and from now on, I think as well. Dr. Panda's another question comes with how fast Korea will change its policy toward China. I think it totally depends on what kind of attitude and policy China will take. If China supports Russian invasion by providing military, equipments to Russia, for example, then I think that indicates new Cold War comes. And if world politics divides into two blocks, Korea's place, I think, is quite clear. So we hope that does not really happen, and especially quite soon. But unfortunately, if China very clearly, in a very clear manner, supports Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the West reacts to it very negatively, then Korea might have to side with the West inevitably. But that's the one we do not really wish to do so. I hope that makes a answer to Dr. Panda's question.
Thank you. Then we have a question from Lawrence Julien. How dependent is North Korea on China's security concerns? China today have expressed deep concerns regarding NATO expansion, and in this perceptive defended the Russian view and their own concern about the Quad, as they view is a threatening military alliance against China. Is North Korea then a vital pawn for China? And of course, what is the public opinion in South Korea on a neutral Korea future, not depending on either China nor United States? So it's two separate questions. Anyone would like to start with that, Wang?
Yeah.
On the Korea part.
Okay. Yeah. Let me answer the question. It's a very interesting question. First of all, what I understand is that question is what does China mean to North Korea, or what does North Korea mean to China? Actually, there is a saying that the lips and teeth traditionally, but nowadays maybe more correct. The expression is that the strategic partner and the strategic the burden or the liability simultaneously, because the China supports North Korea, but not just like that as it did during the Cold War. So China wants some buffer zone on the Korean Peninsula in dealing with the United States, but even to the Chinese people and Chinese government, the North Korean nuclear the issue, and also North Korea's the dictatorship, the domestic politics are also the concern even for the Chinese government. So, but still Chinese government cannot help but support North Korea, very limited, I think, support, because they want to make use of North Korean issues in dealing with the United States. And also, unless North Korea exists, the Chinese will be faced with a very difficult the situation. Second question is about the South Korea's public opinion between the U.S. and China. Of course, South Korea's opinion is more to the United States than the China. Since ever since the Chinese economic sanction on South Korea after the deployment of THAAD in 2015, 2016, the South Korean people's, the image of China got really, worse actually, and it's not getting back to the normal, image. So now, China, the Korean people has somewhat, the not bad actually, it's not good the image of China. But still, Korean people understand that both United States and China are still important, maybe more important. US is more important. So the Korean people, I believe that most Korean people believe that although the United States is an ally and very important, more important than China, but still China has many leverages and influences over the Korean Peninsula. So the many Korean people, I believe, think that we need to, South Korea need to get along with both the great powers. So the Korean people, they expect maybe don't, I expect the U.S. and China to trouble give any additional trouble to the South Korean people in terms of the rivalry and the great power, the tensions. Okay.
Thank you very much. Actually, and you can actually also turn it around. I mean, every time I travel to DPRK, I think it's very clear that the North Koreans are not too interested in being too dependent on China either. I mean, they're trying to find that leverage.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a similar interest in DPRK to extend. I know we also see that once North Korea becomes too dependent on China, they open up relations with South Korea, with Japan, and then you have this round of easing. And then when they feel strong enough, they close the borders again. So it's sort of a cyclical movement. We have a question for Dr. Floberger. What can we expect from the new administration regarding South Korea's middle power status? Anyone who would like to do that?
Yes, let me share just one view about questions and previous questions. So I think the current government has been kind of how to say valued the China's role in kind of changing the North Korea for the past few years. And what we found is that what we expected was not quite fulfilled for many years. So while we expected the China play the important roles, but now the expectation has been almost exhausted, I think, in many dimensions of in South Korea. So this exhausted expectations make this new government can make change the policy towards China and North Korea. That might also an important factor to consider. So now the Chinese role becomes more constant, not the variable in our operations. So this exhaustions is, I think everybody knows in this new government, and expectation was kind of can be more fantasy in some sense. So I'd like to mention that now I think the kind of things are changing in our expectations in this new government as well. So I'm not sure how this new government will react to these changing paradigms of constant relationship with China. That's my comment for that.
Anyone else who would like to take this as the final question? So you can also use the time to sum up.
All right. With regard to the question of middle power policy, there wasn't any vocabulary that President-elect Yoon referred to. But I think well, its aspirations to be a global pivotal power, pivotal state, actually contains some elements of middle power policy. Well, it didn't express exactly in terms of middle power policy, but well, trying to be a global pivotal state actually contains the main aspiration of being an influential middle power in the global affairs. So I think you know President Yoon, President-elect Yoon, and his government will pursue you know middle power policy in essence, but probably you know different name and different you know somewhat differentiated directions.
Oh, may I add one thing?
Yes.
You know, yeah,
Professor
I can
Lim.
agree more. I can agree more with the Professor Ma's that observation, but it looks like it's, you know, if you read the Yoon Suk-yeol's that article again in Foreign Affairs, it looks like they emphasize really the value, democratic value. It sounds like more like, how would you say, ideology oriented. So middle power, you know, we know the concept, it's little in the middle. So in terms of population size, in terms of economic size and so on, but beyond just that, it sounds like the new government wants to pursue really literally pivotal or hub of this network, global network. And at the same time, it sounds like they want to pursue again all this value. Well, is it a smart strategy or not? That's another like a probable topic for discussion, but well, for now, it sounds like that. Okay, that might be my last comment.
Professor Wang, I'll give you the last word if you want it.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up by saying quickly about the middle power diplomacy. And actually, the middle power diplomacy has been pursued by both the conservative and the progressive the government in South Korea. So it is kind of beyond the ideology. That's because the middle power is South Korea's middle power. You know, South Korea's position and South Korea's the situation. So there is some kind of national consensus on that issue. And then also the president-elect Yoon Suk-yeol will also pursue the kind of the middle power diplomacy, such as the Professor Ma said, such as the pivotal state, something like that. And then I think that is the overall trend of South Korean diplomacy, you know, bilaterally strengthening the relations with United States and China, and also the South Korea, you know, seeking for the multilateral room, you know, for the maneuvering the South Korea's the diplomacy. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and I'll wrap up here. I mean, I think there's been 4 outstanding presentations, and as always, South Korean politics is very interesting. You can always trust that there will be a lot of ups and downs, and I think it's extremely good to hear that. I think South Korea's on at least at the doorsteps of being a much more global power, and as a Swede, who is, of course, we feel a certain kinship with the size and the technology and economy and the democracy values of South Korea. I think we welcome this step very much, and I'm sort of very much looking forward to the coming years studying South Korea. Then I would just like to, on the 31st of March, we will have another seminar, A New Dawn, Sino-German Relations Post-Merkel. So tune in on the 31st of March, and we'll give you a dose of Sino-German relations. But, well, let me give a virtual hand to the speakers. Well, thank you
Thank
very
you so
much. And have a
much.
wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.